Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if ISSEI trained with Raynare to become God Part 2? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Jyanzein for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. Link in the description. The peaceful night was accentuated in every street, every neighborhood and home in Gregory. There was not a single sound. Everyone was resting to do their respective tasks the next day. The few who were awake patrolled the place, making as little noise as possible so as not to disturb that sleep. And in the end, they were not the ones to blame for the night's peace to disappear. ISSEI woke up with a loud scream that was silenced on its last stretch when his head hit the metal support that held the upper bed. Just as he got up, ISSEI fell back onto the bed. His scream had turned into a whimper of pain and discomfort before he even realized it. But Raynare's voice was heard before he could do anything else. That sure was a big hit. The fallen angel's tone made her need to annoy quite clear, something that made ISSEI squint. I was going to apologize for waking you up, but I think I'd rather keep it to myself, the brown man stated as he rubbed his forehead painfully. You don't need to apologize. I can't sleep anyway, she replied with a bored expression on her face. Are you nervous about tomorrow? ISSEI sat up in bed and looked up, as if he was actually able to see her. Not really. I'm anxious, but that's not why. Raynare couldn't help but lower her head a little after saying those words. And it really sucks, she concluded, a slight sigh escaping her lips. Raynare leaned back on her bed once more, but soon she heard some movements that made her turn her head. There was ISSEI, resting his arms and head on the edge of her bed. Is it about today? ISSEI clearly alluded to her mother, to which Raynare shook her head. It's not. It's something more personal, and I prefer to keep it to myself. But thank you for worrying about it, she culminated with a cute, genuine smile. ISSEI murmured without taking his eyes off her. If you say so, I guess it's okay, he concluded with a slight smile, to which Raynare responded with a nod. ISSEI made to go back to his bed, but before he could leave, Raynare grabbed his hand, something that surprised him a little. We're going to make it, the fallen angel commented with conviction as she used both of her hands to take ISSEI's with utmost affection, as if to protect him. Yeah, take it for granted. ISSEI's surprise was replaced by a smile, to which she replied in kind. It was still a bit odd for her to see how such a cute and genuine smile could come out of Raynare, being that before she almost always smiled with hidden intentions, how she did it when she wanted to tease him a bit, or when she felt the need to make him believe that everything was fine. That's why it was partly a relief to notice that she now looked so real. There was no other way to describe that feeling, so all he could do was enjoy that smile without her knowing, though Raynare seemed to realize he was admiring her too much, as she tapped his forehead lightly to wake him up. Now go to sleep. I don't want you complaining again about not being able to shower, she commented with a mocking tone, to which ISSEI could only snort in annoyance. It's not my fault women take 40 minutes to take a damn shower, the brown man exclaimed as he walked down the stairs, to which Raynare scoffed. I only listen excuses. Yeah, whatever you say. ISSEI dropped his head back onto his pillow with some force. Suddenly, that tired look changed to a serious one. I'm still dreaming of that moment. ISSEI's frown deepened as the image of his most recent dream flashed through his head. In that image, Raynare was pressing her lips to his. ISSEI began to rub his temple in an attempt to relax. He didn't need to know what those dreams meant. He knew all too well, but he refused to accept it. If he accepted it, then he would be forgiving her. He would be pretending nothing happened. It would be as if she had never killed him. It would be as if she had never betrayed him. That's probably what hurt him the most. It hurt that he still loved her in spite of everything. Unbeknownst to him, Raynare was staring at the ceiling as she rubbed her hands together slowly, the feeling of ISSEI's skin still lingering on her. Apparently, ISSEI wasn't the only one who had woken up with a nightmare, and most likely those disturbed dreams had been much more similar than the two of them could ever believe. But they both knew that their minds shouldn't be focused on love drama at that moment. This was the time to support each other, no matter what tortuous and deviant past they had in common. Chapter 14. Part 1. Shock of Reality _ Raindrops pounded on the glass mercilessly as Vala watched from inside. His hands were in his pockets while a somewhat distant look gave him away. What are you thinking about? Biko came to his side, to which Vala only managed to glance sideways at him. It's about Hayadu. Well, I'd rather say it's that spear. The albino's comment caught Biko's interest. What's up with the spear? Biko asked, rather interested in the conversation. As the training progressed, I could tell that he made great progress with the boosted gear. But it's different with the spear, as he's only been able to master the most basic attacks but didn't show much improvement beyond that. Vala clarified, his eyes averted to look at him, and his companion looked quite astonished after his words. Is that so? I thought he did pretty well. A rather confused Biko asked. It wasn't if we take into account what that spear means. Vala replied simply, to which Biko only managed to grab his chin. Now that's strange, Biko remarked, only to then sneer. That's the first time I've seen you so focused on evaluating a person's possible potential. Are you afraid? Vala scoffed with a snort after his comment. Of course I'm not. I'm just saying that I found it rather strange. Vala replied, his gaze settling on his companion more avidly. I wouldn't put too much stock in that. It's as strange a weapon as it is mystical. Most likely only ISSEI and that Dulio guy must know how it works. Well, ISSEI's still at it. Biko instantly corrected himself after noticing that for sure ISSEI knew the same thing they did, which is to say, nothing. I must admit that's a good point. Vala nodded, only to sketch a faint smile. I'm surprised that something logical would come from you. That's right, wait, what? Biko's indignation soon followed after realizing the insult. You're not the one to talk about logical things. The man pointed at him incriminatingly, to which Vala could only close his eyes and smile. I guess you're right. Vala turned his gaze back to the rain, to which Biko was quick to join him. It's been 2 days since our farewell. They must have started the mission, right? They sure have. It was kind of complicated to begin with. Biko clicked his tongue in concern. Do you think they'll be okay? Vala couldn't help but chuckle a little at the question. Knowing them, they sure are scared to death. Achoo. Alan sneezed in an exaggerated manner as he rolled around on a couch. Dude, ID can't be that hooted. The Argentine complained as he had 4 fans pointed at his body. Shut up, I'm in line for promotion to Challenger. Young Len ordered him without taking his eyes off the screen. You're already about to reach Challenger in just 2 days? Now that's worthy of a Korean. Alan commented, to which young Len gave him a sidelong glance. I'm not. Yes. The Korean blinked in utter confusion as he noticed that for the first time Alan had not mistaken him for Chinese. Don't put that much water in it, you'll ruin everything. Raynare, using her Yuma aspect, slammed a frying pan on ISSEI's head, who started rolling on the floor while holding his head. Guys, Rick looked from side to side, his strained smile more than evident. Am I the only one who's worried? Thought the man, who was standing in the middle of the small apartment. That's where they were staying in this short stay in Colombia. The place was so small that it only had 3 rooms, and one of them was the bathroom, so they were inevitably taking turns sleeping on the couches. But by the looks of it, the accommodations were going to be shorter even than they thought. Rick suddenly became serious, and the others followed soon after. It only took a second for a smoke bomb to shatter the only window in the room, to which everyone was startled. Violet smoke began to emerge from the object, causing everyone to cover their faces. This isn't smoke. They all thought at the same time. Still, Kuroka's poison was much stronger. ISSEI concluded in his mind, to which he soon faked his loss of consciousness. The others soon followed suit. The only one who added to the drama was Alan, who tried to flee towards the door, but ended up falling unconscious. Only a few seconds passed before a hooded woman forced the doorknob open. It was noticeable that she was of the female gender due to the fact that no tunic would be able to cover such a voluptuous body. I managed to catch all 4 of them. The woman communicated through a magic circle, then crouched down in front of Alan. Perfect, make sure they don't die from the poison. A male voice echoed from the other side. Don't worry. Apparently they have a good resistance, since their bodies haven't changed color. Clarified the woman, to which she narrowed her eyes. It's the first time something like this has happened. We didn't use it many times before either. Bring them at once. Clarified the man's voice, to which the woman nodded. Okay, but I'll make sure they sleep for a while longer. ISSEI opened one of his eyes after hearing that. The woman had thrown another 4 gas grenades, to which they all slowly began to get dizzy, until they finally fell unconscious. _line jump _ unknown location. He didn't know how much time had passed. It was impossible for him to know. So even knowing where he was even more complicated. That's what his disoriented eyes expressed as ISSEI looked from side to side, his blurry vision slowly becoming sharper and sharper. The first thing he distinguished was the color white. Everything was bloody white, even those blurry figures moving. Figures? ISSEI quickly got up from the ground and activated his gauntlet. The ring on his left hand glowed and from it emerged his spear, which he was quick to catch in his hand. His hostile posture quickly changed as he noticed these people wandering back and forth with no apparent objective. Some of them were eating at some tables, but without a doubt each of these white-clad subjects had a dead look on their faces, as if they only lived by pure instinct, something that earned a great chill in ISSEI. The brown-haired man tried to move forward to observe the panorama better, but it was a bit complicated to do so in such a crowd. There were everything from the elderly to children, something that was disturbing. What the hell is wrong with these people? The brown-haired man thought as he bumped shoulders with one of them. Some of those subjects were looking at him with some intrigue due to his colorful clothing, but it only lasted for a second. In the end, ISSEI managed to reach a place that was not too crowded with people, and suddenly he felt a huge sense of discomfort surround his body as he looked from one side to the other. The ceiling was so high it was dizzying, everything was white, even the bland food was white. And as if that wasn't enough, there were more than 100 people walking around in that place, aimlessly. What is this? A prison? ISSEI asked himself as he felt his body suffer a great shock from the desolate landscape he found himself in. He had not yet become accustomed to the place, but distinguishing a black, red and blue color among a colorless world caught his attention. There stood Raynare, young Len and Rick, who seemed to be looking for him. Once their gazes met, the three ran to meet in the center of that unfamiliar place. I'm glad you guys are okay, ISSEI exclaimed with a happy smile, to which Raynare and young Len replied with the same enthusiasm. Same here. Do you know what this place is? Raynare asked, the serious look soon returning to her. I have no idea, but I already tried to create a magic circle several times and no case. ISSEI answered with the same seriousness. We ail in the enemy's lail. For Sul it has a strong Belial Pleventing escape, explained young Len. By the way, has anyone healed from Alan? The question caused Rick to frown. Actually, when I woke up I could see him. You won't like the answer. This caused the three of them to look at each other with clear unease. Alan fell to his knees, an annoyed expression crossed his face as he looked straight ahead. His arms were restrained with special handcuffs that denied him the use of any magic. The Argentinian watched as the woman who had restrained him advanced forward. Her body was now much more visible thanks to the fact that she was wearing a beautiful crimson dress. Said woman turned to give him a look. Her dark hair was tied back in a long ponytail, and her eyes as dark as obsidian gave her a beautiful touch as well as a dark one. Her white skin stood out even more thanks to that mole under her left eye. What do you want from me? Alan decided it would be best to continue with the theatrics, though his challenging expression never disappeared from his face. 5 poison bombs. The woman spoke suddenly, to which she caught Alan's interest. That's not a normal thing to say. Who do you work for? She spoke calmly throughout, but Alan felt her eyes seemed to be piercing his chest. Give it up, Jessica. What once looked like a huge white wall slowly ran away, implying that it was a large curtain. It doesn't matter if they work for someone or not. The curtains were drawn all the way back, there showing a young man who was in his late 20s to early 30s, wearing a ragged lab coat that was covered in blood. Anyway, you'll never be able to leave this place again, the guy stated with a slight smile. Alan didn't pay much attention to him, as he looked much more focused on the amount of strange contraptions and experiments that were behind the man. There were tables, gurneys, different artifacts, blood, bodies piled in a dumpster, and the remains of fallen angel wings that looked like they had been mutilated by the product of rage and neglect. It was like a large laboratory, a bloody laboratory. The more Alan saw, the more disgust he felt, and his face made it clear. Yeah, some people react that way when they see this. Most end up peeing their pants. The man sneered as he looked at him, to which Alan simply gritted his teeth. Where is that bastard William? Alan accused angrily. I told him they were undercover agents. Jessica stepped in between the two of them. They need to be killed now. Before the woman could make any move, the man grabbed her waist and planted a big that surprised even Alan. One hand went to one of her breasts, to which a somewhat exalted moan emerged from her lips as they parted. Don't worry, no need to take drastic measures just yet. It's been a while since the project has stalled, maybe one of them could help. The man's words earned an awkward nod from Jessica, who seemed to be ecstatic about the, all right, there's something you need to understand. The stranger walked over to kneel in front of Alan, then cupped his chin with a somewhat creepy smile. The only one asking questions here is me, understood? Alan simply turned his face away from the man roughly, to which the man stood up with a chuckle. If you want to ask, just ask. Alan shot back with a dangerous tone, to which a somewhat sick smile crossed the nurse's face. I'm going to reward you for your willingness. But for now, let's start with some basic questions. _line break _. Are you sure that's going to work? ISSEI broke away from Raynare slightly after she whispered in his ear. Can you think of any other ideas? She interjected, to which the Brown simply looked between Rick and young Len, who simply nodded. Very well, ISSEI sighed, then smiled. But don't apologize to me later. ISSEI slapped Raynare hard on the cheek, who staggered backwards until she bumped into some prisoners, who were confused. "How dare you!" Raynare yelled through gritted teeth, a sneaky smile emerging from her lips as she made both her elbows back, delivering short but hard blows to the poor man behind her. Raynare punched him back just as hard, so ISSEI staggered backwards until finally crashing into one of the tables, flipping it over and knocking everything off it, something no one received very well. "What?" One of them tried to say something, but it came to nothing as young Len impacted on the man for being thrown by Rick. "What the hell are you doing? We don't feel like wasting our time with these stupid disputes," one man shouted angrily, to which Rick just let himself be grabbed by him and thrown against a large number of men, slamming them all to the ground. And just like that, a huge pitched battle broke out, where everyone was fighting against everyone. _line jump _. The stranger looked at the small notebook, then back at Rick again. "Let me get this straight," the man went over the notes in the notebook. "You were born in Pakistan, but you have African nationality, and at the same time you were raised in Colombia?" The man looked at Alan, who remained unmoved. "Do you really think I'll believe such stupidity? You're not even black. I had a disease in my skin pigmentation," Alan replied instantly. "This is ridiculous." Jessica couldn't help but rub her temple in annoyance. "What's your name?" The stranger asked another question, to which Alan opted for the most serious face he could. "My name is Walter White." The man and Jessica looked at each other after hearing the answer. "So, you're a Pakistani of African nationality who grew up in Colombia and has an American name?" The stranger tossed the notebook away as he took a couple of steps to crouch down in front of him. "All that's missing now is for you to tell me you were a drug dealer wanted by an entire country. You wouldn't believe me if I told you," was Alan's simple reply, to which the man simply smiled. "All right, we tried it on the good side." The man stood up, watching the woman. "I have no problem if you make him one of your puppets, Jessica." Those words caused a somewhat psychopathic, hot smile to emerge from the woman's face, so Alan couldn't help but sweat. "Oh, that sounds pretty funny." Jessica had the intentions of approaching Alan, but a strange sound stopped her. Jessica wasn't the only one who noticed it, as both Alan and the stranger were confused. The stranger approached the edge of the large white glass in his lab, and disbelief soon struck his face as he saw that the prisoners were making a big fuss downstairs. "What the?" The man's disbelief turned to fury. "Jessica, calm this ruckus down now and bring the obvious culprits here to me." Jessica said nothing, just retreated towards the big door with a clearly annoyed look on her face, to which Alan just smirked. Hey, Alan looked ahead, and was surprised to see how that seemingly calm man was delivering him a death stare. "From what I can see, I'm going to have to teach you and your friends some manners." _line jump _. One of the two giant gates began to slowly open, revealing a really annoyed Jessica. "Stop now!" The huge commotion that was going on stopped almost at the root, and silence soon followed after a few seconds. No doubt that silence was deadly, as all the prisoners watched in fright as that woman made her way through them until she finally reached the center of the site, where she saw how ISSEI was grabbing a man by his t-shirt, but quickly released him. The poor guy slipped away in 4 steps so as not to fall victim to that woman's wrath. Troublemakers are always there, but this is the first time someone has generated such a fuss, commented Jessica with her arms crossed, watching as Raynare, Rick and young Len stopped in front of ISSEI to support him. "Where's William?" ISSEI asked, materializing his gauntlet and activating his spear. "Wheel is my sistel?" Young Len asked, materializing his scythe with a distinctly hostile air about the woman. "I don't even know who you are," Jessica replied smugly, to which young Len narrowed his eyes. "Neither do I. But I don't need to lemon bell your face to know you live that hole of a, young Len." Rick placed a hand on his chest, the twice critical already activated in his hand. "Oh? So you're the leader of this peculiar group?" A sly smile emerged from Jessica, and just then her eyes glowed pink. Rick's eyes darkened from one moment to the next, and his hands slowly moved away from young Len. Neither realized that something strange was going on with their captain. "Do you want to do this the easy way or the hard way?" Raynare's ring glowed and turned into his sword, which soon emanated some flames. I think you've already made that decision yourselves." Jessica gestured with her finger to goad them into attacking her, or so it seemed at first. "All right, you asked for it," ISSEI exclaimed energetically and lunged at the woman, but just before she could do anything, Raynare and young Len's eyes widened in quiet astonishment. "ISSEI, stop!" ISSEI stopped dead in his tracks just at the last second, as Rick appeared in front of him so he could protect Jessica. "Rick!" ISSEI couldn't say much more as he jumped back after seeing Jessica pull out a large dagger from under her dress. Everyone was speechless as Jessica pressed the cold metal over Rick's throat, causing a small trickle of blood to run freely. "Now you will do exactly as I tell you, is that right?" _line jump _. A few minutes later, they all fell to their knees beside Alan, who watched him rather uneasily. Are you all right? The Argentine asked with concern. Rick is acting strange. ISSEI forced against the handcuffs in an attempt to break them, but couldn't. Hey Rick! Alan called out to his captain, but fell silent when he saw that the man was unresponsive. Meanwhile, Raynare watched as that woman handed the sword and spear to the strange nurse, who looked quite happy with the newfound toys. I told you they'd be worth leaving alive. The man's yell caught everyone's attention. You're always right. You're unbelievable. Jessica blurted out with a dreamy look on her face. Hey! The man approached the group, watching everyone with a big smile. Can someone tell me who owns this spear? The man asked, tossing the sword to the ground as he grabbed the spear with both hands, as if it were an object beyond divine. Get your hands off my things. ISSEI was quick to respond, to which the man smiled. You know something? I'm in a better mood thanks to you. The man knelt down in front of ISSEI, who just watched him through gritted teeth. I don't know if you know this, but this sacred gear is a divine weapon. That means it contains great pure power within it, something I need. Those words caused a smile to appear on ISSEI's face. No matter what you do, you won't succeed in extracting its power. The brown man stated, to which the man looked at the spear. Listen to this. You can free me and these people. You can turn in your boss, and even if you behave yourself, your sentence may not be to lose your head and live in peace. Raynare was the one to speak on this occasion, to which everyone looked at her. Raynare! ISSEI complained. What? I just think negotiation can work. Raynare bowed her shoulders in protest. Did you hear that, Jessica? The man looked at the woman, who just smiled. Release that man? Jessica watched Rick as his eyes glowed again, and the man seemed to come to, though he was very agitated. Rick, are you all right? ISSEI asked rather worriedly. So you want me to turn William in? The man stood back up to look at everyone. You know, I've lived for a long time, but this is the first time I've come across people as hopeful as you guys. You know, those typical people who think everything will turn out all right, even when they find themselves in a really screwed up situation. The stranger approached towards Rick. I admire that. The world needs more people like you. The stranger grabbed Rick's handcuffs to pull him to his feet, then pulled him closer towards Jessica. Do you have the keys? They all looked at each other, noticing that they had been able to convince this man in such a simple way. Just as Rick was about to be released, the stranger broke his leg in such a way as to force him to the floor, earning a loud scream in response, to which they all watched in some shock. You damned bastard, leave him! ISSEI exclaimed, rising from the ground to attack him, only to be knocked to the ground once again when he received a hard kick to the abdomen. Demons, fallen angels and humans. There can't be a more corrupt and disgusting composition. The man stomped on ISSEI's head hard. And yet you all think you have any chance of negotiating with me. The man squeezed ISSEI's head even harder and placed the spear on his neck. Do you not realize the situation you are in, or do you just not want to see it? The man began to stomp on ISSEI's head brutally, to the point that he left him on the verge of unconsciousness. Stop! Alan wanted to leap to his defense, but was easily repelled as he struck him with the spear using its blunt end. There is no negotiation, no salvation. You are merely disposable puppets from now on. The stranger turned away from ISSEI to look at them all. There is no script for me to save you, is that clear? The man paused to look at everyone, and seeing that no one said anything, just settled for a satisfied nod. The man walked over to Jessica to hand her the spear and take Raynare's sword. At that moment a rather tense silence came over the place. A script, there is no such thing as that in real life. Never forget that the man stood with his back turned as he held Raynare's sword in silence. The hostility of the sight dropped quite a bit after those words, signaling the end of the first confrontation. This will remind you. ISSEI closed his eyes tightly as a large amount of blood splattered on him. His eyes opened, and he could only watch as Rick's head rolled to stand in front of him. This will remind you. ISSEI closed his eyes tightly as a large amount of blood splattered on him. His eyes widened, and all he could do was watch as Rick's head rolled to stand in front of him. His trembling eyes became somewhat opaque as they widened after processing the monstrous act that had been unleashed in front of him. His other companions had similar reactions. Alan and young Len fell to the ground in complete shock, and Raynare could only watch as the large pool of blood grew larger and larger with each passing second, until it touched her knees. The crimson reflection allowed to see the face of the fallen, who slowly began to shed tears. Rick, and oh! Raynare's scream was the last thing ISSEI heard before he fell unconscious, not only from his injuries, but mostly from the shock he had just received. 15. Plunged into the unknown. The gloom of unconsciousness slowly began to dissipate. Issei's blurred vision cleared with a shimmering calm, and the particular sensation of déjà vu fell upon him when the first color he could distinguish was white. Rick! Issei sat up on the bunk immediately after shouting his captain's name. The memories of everything he had been through were beginning to whip him mercilessly. Even in his deplorable state from before, that disturbing image kept replaying over and over again in his head. Issei could do nothing but lower his gaze, his fists and teeth clenched in heartbreaking frustration as he tried his best not to let the tears roll down his cheeks. There's no time for this, I have to complete the mission. Issei slapped his cheeks with great force to try to calm himself down, but his trembling body and pained expression implied that it had no effect. Why are you hitting yourself so hard, doesn't it hurt? The childish voice made Issei distracted for a moment, and he looked up to face his peculiar roommate. Children? Was the first thing that crossed his mind as he saw the little girl's face peek out from the bunk. Her eyes were hazel and her long hair was a deep blonde color. Not that I want to be rude or anything like that, but it would be best if you didn't hurt yourself. They don't like that, unless they do it with their bare hands. Although, I don't think you can understand me anyway, the girl clarified with a shy tone. She couldn't even look him in the face. Wait, Issei put a hand to his ear after noticing that they had changed all his clothes, and apparently they had taken away the translator. Are you Japanese? Huh? Can you understand me? A hint of happiness appeared on the girl's face, to which Issei nodded. Of course, we speak the same language. Issei clarified with a toothy smile, and then became somewhat serious. By the way, can you tell me where we are? I actually wanted to ask you that. I came to this place with my mom and brother a few days ago, and the girl stopped talking when someone walked past outside the gates. That caught Issei's attention, who stood up and took a couple of steps to hold the bars. He was a bit surprised by what he saw, as there were many men wandering free in the corridor that was filled with cages. Hey! Issei tried to call out to one of them, but the guy just kept walking, making Issei follow him with his eyes. It's no use. Issei focused his gaze on the girl, who was covering herself with the blankets. I think those men were good before, but that bad woman brainwashed them all. My brother acted that way too until… The girl was silent. A sad look graced her face. It's okay, you don't need to tell me. Issei commented calmly. He didn't need to be a genius to know how that sentence ended. What about the other cages? Do you know anyone? Issei asked the question while observing all the nearest prisons. In all of them there was 1 or 2 people who were covering themselves with their blankets while shivering, as if they wanted to isolate themselves from the life they were living right now. The people here don't talk much, except for a few. What I've noticed is that almost all of them are women, but sometimes they lock up a man. The girl clarified, to which Issei just nodded. So, that woman has the ability to control men? Issei put a hand to his chin as he continued with his thoughts. No matter how much I try to think about it, there is no way to counteract that. Only Raynare could fight her face to face. Issei concluded his thoughts with a gritting of his teeth. The enemies were stranger than he thought. Are you all right, comrade? Drake's voice echoed inside his mind, something that took Issei out of his thoughts. I can't help but remember Azazel's words at the moment, but it's not like I can do anything about it right now. The first thing would be to get out of this place without generating so much commotion. Can you think of any ideas? Issei remained static as he spoke to Drake telepathically, to which the girl just watched him with great confusion. To be honest, you guys are well and truly screwed. The only way out of here would be brute force, but you're definitely not strong enough. I think you already proved that with what happened not long ago. Drake clarified with a somber tone, making it clear that the situation was really complicated. So, are you saying that we just wait for them to use us as guinea pigs until they get tired of us? Issei couldn't help but clench his fists a little after his words. I'm sorry, but I don't know what to tell you. You realize it yourself, don't you? They didn't even bother to seal your powers with those magic handcuffs, so they don't even see you as a threat. Drake clarified, to which Issei could only sigh. So we're just left to hope for some kind of miracle or something? Issei leaned back against the bars, to which Drake nodded his tone. Unfortunately, yes, my friend. Did anyone ever tell you that you're a pessimist to the extreme? I'm just a realist. Don't bother thinking of a way to escape. The girl's voice made Issei end his conversation with Drake. My mom and I thought about it several times, but it never worked out. I see. I may regret asking this question, but your mother? Issei left the question half-finished, and all the girl did was lower her gaze a little. A rather awkward silence arose between them after that little conversation. Don't worry, you'll get out of here. The girl looked at Issei with slight surprise after the statement. But, I know it's hard, but that's what we were sent here for. Issei gave a small smile to the girl after interrupting her, to which she simply smiled. The edge of the knife emitted a particular gleam in front of the eyes of that unknown man. Jessica was at the other end of the large room looking at some screens that transmitted different sectors of the site, especially the cells. Any news? The man asked without taking his eyes off the knife. Everything is under control, as always. Jessica turned around on the wheelchair to look at him. What about the new ones? The man asked again, his gaze stopping on the table in front of him, where True Longinus was placed. The woman is alone. The 3 men are in separate cells, but one of them has a girl as a companion. The woman stated as she watched the cameras, but quickly turned her gaze back to the stranger. Are you sure this was the best decision? Perhaps they will become more unruly for having killed one of their comrades. That's exactly why they will behave. They know that if they don't behave, then one of them will be next. Except for that guy, the man's face reflected on the metal of the spear. We can't risk losing him before he gives us all the information on this extraordinary thing. I still don't understand what you see in him, Jessica commented with complete honesty, as it was strange to see her partner so excited about something. It's normal, this weapon hides its sacred power very well. That said, it would be best to clear up all the mysteries as soon as possible. The man made a small silence when he placed the knife on the mast, leaving his sentence halfway. So, do you want me to brainwash him? Can I have a little fun with him before I take him to you? I'm very interested in tasting a part of that boy that caught your attention so much, asked a somewhat hopeful Jessica as she looked around the cell where Issei was being held. Do what you want, but don't make him useless. The man clarified without much importance, inserting a small part of the knife on the mast. At that precise moment, his eyes widened to their widest. A strong surge of holy power was felt throughout the room and took the form of a great explosion of golden lightning that completely devoured the man's figure in less than a second, so that neither of them had time to react. Issei sat on the bed when a strong tremor shook the whole place as if it were an earthquake. The strange thing was that the anomaly only lasted for a second, which left a strange silence afterwards. What was that? Another strong tremor, much more forceful, shook the cells after his question. But that wasn't the only thing that happened, as a strong golden glow forced their eyes closed. The girl crawled under the covers and closed her eyes even tighter as a flashing, fleeting sound seemed to crash against all the walls. The agitation of the moment slowly took a back seat to the opening of Issei's eyes. At first the brown-haired man looked rather confused, a confusion that was soon replaced by a more than palpable stupefaction. The jail was covered in dust, but it was still very easy to see the destruction that had been caused. Some bars were bent and melted, the walls and ceiling were leaky, and there was even a considerable hole behind the bed that, from the large glow coming from there, seemed to lead to the outside. Are you all right? Issei's shock left his body after remembering his cellmate. Why yes, but what happened? The girl pulled off the blankets to reveal her frightened face. Issei didn't answer her right away. The first thing she did was to head to the outside of the cell, and as she suspected, everything was a mess. There didn't seem to be any people hurt, but the vast majority of women looked very confused as they watched from outside the cells, and a few others stayed inside without having the courage to even poke their heads outside, as there were many men who were trying to restrain all the prisoners. I have no idea, but this might be just what I needed. Issei activated his gauntlet and looked at it with a half-smile. What do you think, Drake? The priority is to find out where we are, and then meet up with your companions. The dragon clarified, to which Issei nodded in agreement. Wait, are you leaving? Can I come with you? Asked the girl, her eyes shining, and her tone hinted that she was about to cry, something that Issei didn't overlook. You can't, it's too dangerous. Issei moved a little closer as he saw how the girl lowered her head and began to cry. Don't be afraid. If you hide through this hole, no one will be able to find you for sure. I promise I will come back as soon as possible to. Issei stopped his speech as he approached the gap, to which the girl looked at him with some confusion, a confusion that only increased as she watched Issei's face grow paler and paler, until he moved again. Issei peeked his face through the gap, and his eyes were forced to close a little by the strong light and wind coming from that room. But the disturbing factor was that it was not a room. Once his eyes became accustomed to the strange environment, they widened in a way rarely seen in him. It's got to be a damn joke, Issei's thoughts slipped from his mouth as he looked at the clouds. Those are clouds. Then was flying through the damn clouds with what appeared to be a gigantic hot air balloon that was surrounded by an imposing force field. That same craft began to flicker until it became completely invisible, except for those openings that were present because of the damage. All right, I wasn't expecting this, Drake stated, his tone of voice in sync with his words. We're in the middle of nowhere. We can't communicate or teleport. ISSEI pulled his face in again, placing a hand on his chin. Can you fly? The question was directed to the girl, who looked at him with a rather astonished look. Can you fly? The question made the answer more than clear, to which ISSEI simply lowered his head. Very well. If you can't get out, you'd better hide under the bed. ISSEI turned his gaze to the girl, who lowered her face slightly. Promise you'll come back? Her eyes again threatened to shed tears, to which ISSEI smiled. Of course. ISSEI answered without hesitation, but he was not prepared for what he would see next. The girl finally left her blankets behind and jumped off the top bunk. What left ISSEI speechless is seeing that she was missing an arm. She noticed his look, so she couldn't help but rub the area of her missing arm rather uncomfortably. ISSEI felt a bit guilty seeing her like that, so he soon crouched down to be at her level. Hey, what's your name? Ito Rika. She answered, her eyes glancing sideways at him occasionally as she was still quite uncomfortable. Rika, huh? That's a nice name. ISSEI placed a hand on her head, to which Rika finally looked at him again. Thus the brown-haired man turned away from his new acquaintance. What's yours? Rika asked him before he left the cell, which stopped him in his tracks. My name is Hayata ISSEI. ISSEI turned his face to look at her, giving a smile that would be able to calm anyone down. Be sure not to forget my name, as you will have me to thank when I come back to rescue you. The girl's eyes widened a bit, but she soon responded with a cute smile. Once ISSEI turned his gaze back to the front, his expression changed completely. The hallway was a mess because of the debris, though it certainly wouldn't be that difficult to move forward if it weren't for the large crowd of men coming and going, holding back some violent inmates, or trying to fix some cells without much efficiency. Hey, boom! The man didn't even have time to say 2 words, as ISSEI met him with a strong hook to the jaw after feeling someone grab his shoulder. The blow was so surprising that he ended up crashing into the destroyed bars, causing one of his legs to end up pierced. Idiot, don't forget that these people are being controlled. Drake exclaimed with clear fury. Sorry, it was instinctive. ISSEI stopped his excuses when a debris flew against his face. Luckily, he managed to dodge it by miracle. Hey, be careful with that. ISSEI scolded the men in front of him, but they didn't care. It didn't take ISSEI long to realize this when they started running in his direction. Don't hurt them anymore, Drake shouted, to which ISSEI began to run, thus starting a chase. Since when do you care so much about people who aren't ING dragons? ISSEI exclaimed between screams while dodging and stomping on the different opponents that stood in front of him. From the moment my ING carrier will feel like crap for hurting innocents. Just keep running, you ING idiot, clarified Drake in a rather exalted tone. It was rare to see the great celestial dragon like this, but the current situation and his peculiar carrier were a direct catalyst towards losing his sanity. Once this is all over, we're going to have to deal with your vocabulary, Drake, ISSEI exclaimed, running at full speed while on his back was a large stampede of men in pursuit. Do you seriously think my ING vocabulary is the ING linchpin of the problem right now? Yeah, you'll definitely be embarrassed once this is over, ISSEI thought with a pouty face. The brown-haired man turned to the right, and the surprise on his face was not long in coming when he saw a large number of unconscious men, but they were not in bad shape. His doubts were immediately answered when he looked toward the end of the cells, seeing that young Len was closing the door. Hey, wait! ISSEI raised his hand and shouted at the top of his lungs, to which the Chinese man looked at him with some surprise. ISSEI? Young Len didn't say more than his name, as his face darkened in a rather peculiar way as he watched a large number of jailers emerge from the back of the hallway, and he didn't need to be a genius to know that they were all after his friend. Wait! There's no need to go to such an extreme. They're being controlled by that woman. ISSEI turned pale as he watched young Len summon the chain sickle. Is that right? Young Len lowered his weapon a little, and quickly began to look for some other way to stop the men. Use the door! ISSEI's shout caught his friend's attention. The door? Young Len asked rather confusedly. I could check, they're normal people. Don't even know how to control their power a little. You just need to close that hatch. Young Len hesitated for a moment, but quickly understood that he didn't have time for that as he noticed that ISSEI was already only a few meters away. Once ISSEI was through the door, young Len closed it tightly and turned the hatch. It only took a few seconds to hear a large number of them slam into the door, but the door didn't move an inch. ISSEI placed his hands on his knees as he tried to catch his breath. Are you all right? Asked the Chinese man. Yes, I just ran a marathon. I don't know how many pavilions I've been through, ISSEI said, taking a last sigh to control his breathing. By the looks of it, you've hiked far enough to get to this place. Young Len's words made ISSEI look up, and he soon noticed that they were in a room quite different from what they had seen so far. There was quite a lot of color in the place, though mostly red-rained. It wasn't a very big place, but there was a rather luxurious bed with different extravagant clothes and lingerie posing in the half-open closet. "What is this place?" asked a rather confused ISSEI. "It's a dormitorium," young Len answered, approaching the desk in search of something interesting. "Who would like to have a dormitory next to the cells?" ISSEI plopped down on the bed, then took a picture. "Look at this." ISSEI showed him the photo, which showed a slightly younger, but still quite recognizable Jessica. "There you have the answer," young Len commented vaguely, turning his gaze to a piece of paper that had apparently caught his interest. "How do we find Alan and Raynare now?" ISSEI wondered aloud as he sat down on the bed. "We need to get him to know where we are. We won't be wild anymore marathons." Those words embarrassed ISSEI a little. "Let's use this for that." Those words caught ISSEI's interest, who stood up and approached young Len. "And what is that?" ISSEI looked at the paper in confusion. "It's a blueprint. It may not be the same as a map, but it will be quite useful," young Len replied, rolling up the long blue paper. "And how do we get out of here?" "The roof." "The roof?" Young Len materialized his sickle and threw it at the roof, which he got through without much trouble. He then pulled the chain with both hands, which destroyed half of the roof on the spot. ISSEI stared at the gaping hole for a couple of seconds. "Well, I'm sure she won't be happy about this. And you think that makes me feel bad?" ISSEI watched as the Chinese man used his fallen angel wings to reach the upper floor. "I see that it doesn't." ISSEI bowed his shoulders, then followed his friend. Raynare came to a sudden stop after climbing the stairs at a rather brisk pace. Her face peered over the corner as she slowly opened the door, or so she tried to do. Her face tensed considerably as the door came crashing down. The tension-shrouded moment didn't last long, as her expression turned to a rather shocked one as she saw how the strange man's laboratory was completely destroyed. Her eyes roamed the large space one last time before entering. Caution in her movements was felt with every step she took as she looked around, seeing how many cracks in the site emitted some small golden rays. Thanks to that, she was also able to assess that some debris was piled up, indicating that someone had ordered it out of the way. What the hell happened in this place? The Fallen wondered internally as she stopped in front of the last part of the room, where the damage was considerably less, but still lingering. Raynare looked at the several stretchers that were covered by some cloths. Most of them were covered in blood, which did not bode well. Her hand hesitated with opening one of the many cloths, but in the end she shook her head. "There's no time for this, they could be back at any moment," Raynare said to herself, then fixed her gaze on the desk, or well, what was left of it. The woman quickly approached it, and pulled out several pieces of debris. One of those many debris was a knife with a melted edge, something that caught her attention, but she quickly continued with her work. Her work soon paid off when she found a detailed map of the place, something that brought a smile to her face. Raynare decided to continue digging through the other papers, mostly rather poorly handled, and her eyes slowly widened as she read the few reports that were salvageable. At the end her face looked somewhat troubled, but she quickly shook her head to dispel those thoughts and put the map in her pocket. Next she picked up her sword that was embedded in the wall near the desk, and just as she was about to leave she stopped, as some debris from the desk shifted and revealed something shiny that caught her attention. Several old women in the same cell hugged each other tightly and began to tremble as they watched all the debris they had placed against the front door slowly fall away. The door burst open, generating a small wave of dust. They all closed their eyes in fear after hearing footsteps approaching. "Are you sure this ward is the last one?" ISSEI's sudden question made the old women's eyes widen with some confusion, as they had never heard that voice before. "Of course, why wasn't it?" Young Len clarified as he looked at the blueprint carefully. "That's what you said 30 minutes ago." "Let me see." ISSEI took the blueprints from him and began to read. "This is Ward 5, right? Then we should be wait. This whole damn thing is in English. How the hell were you supposed to understand it? Come to think of it, how come we're talking without the translator? Did you just figure that out?" asked the Chinese man with his arms crossed. "For your information, traductor wasn't available until a few years ago. If you wanted to understand others, the only option you had was to apply valuable languages." "Okay, that explains it, Arg." The chatter stopped when a man tackled them in surprise. "What the?" ISSEI stood up and materialized his gauntlet immediately, while young Len shoved him off him with a hard shove. "Could it be another one of them?" young Len asked in a whisper as he stood next to him. "Probably. Remember not to hurt him too much," ISSEI answered quietly. "I won't plum anything." Young Len was about to summon his sickle, but stopped when he saw how the man was watching them with a rather strange smile. Are you the guys who caused the mess before everything exploded? The sudden question made ISSEI and young Len look at each other. It's the first time one of them has said more than 3 words to us. It's true. Does that change anything? I don't know, it's strange. I think we should knock him out like the others. Hey, wait. Take it easy. Are you looking for the queen? The sudden question of the man who seemed drugged caught the attention of both of them. The queen? Young Len didn't finish his question. All he did was look at ISSEI, who answered in the same way. It's normal that they don't know where to go. They are new to this place. The Majesty loves to throw parties in her custom hall when something big happens. Most likely your friend is already there too. The weird answer only made them look at each other one more time. Just play along. That man may have important information about Alan's whereabouts. Drake's inner voice made ISSEI react more appropriately. And where do we have to go to see the queen? ISSEI asked with a cautious tone, to which young Len just kept silent and listened. Just follow me. I will take you to the Great Hall. The drugged-looking man began to walk slowly, to which ISSEI soon followed him. Are you sure about this? You don't need to be very smart to know who Queen is, young Len said in a whisper. I know, but Alan may be in danger. ISSEI whispered back, to which the Chinese could only frown a little. You're right, but is very dangerous. He thinks we're under that woman's control. She probably thinks so too. We just have to keep pretending. I get it, but she didn't have her damn brain washed. Just trust me. Young Len paused for a second to let out a big, long sigh. This is going to end badly. In the end, the old women looked at each other. They looked quite confused. One of them finally broke the silence, speaking in her trembling voice. Could it be that those 2 boys have not fallen under Jessica's spell? After crossing through what appeared to be the main pavilion, a long hallway of stairs leading to the upper floor presented itself, something that caught the attention of the 2 friends. A music began to throb more and more forcefully over their ears as they climbed each step. There was an explosion that took much of the ship out of control, and this woman has no better idea than to throw a party. What the hell is wrong with these people? ISSEI whispered to the Korean. And what do you expect from them? You can see how they can't stand people. They're completely crazy. Young Len answered as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Yes, but is everything all right? The stranger asked them when he stopped in front of a double door, to which ISSEI tensed up. We were just talking about whether or not the Mistress RHMM. The Queen will be accompanied by that doctor. ISSEI tried to correct his slip as he cleared his throat, though it was a rather poor attempt. From what I understand, he's recovering. Fortunately for both of them, the man's brain was too fried to notice the obvious facade the brown man was putting up. Oh, I see. ISSEI and young Len looked at each other after acquiring the new information, their complicit looks at it all. If that guy was gone, then the possibility of escaping and regrouping would be much easier in case something went wrong. Please come with me. We have arrived. The man slowly opened the door and entered the place, so young Len and ISSEI had a little privacy time. Why were you chasing us before and now you are taking us to your boss? ISSEI asked the question. I don't know if you've noticed, but the wards were pretty empty compared to what the Plimelos were like minutes after the explosion. It's clear that this woman has some kind of mental ability that allows her to control minds within a certain area. The most certain thing is that she gave them some Olden not long when they found us. The Korean delivered the deduction he had been building up over these minutes of walking. Why does it only work on men, and why aren't we affected? ISSEI asked more complicated questions, to which young Len simply bowed his shoulders. We don't have enough information about it. That's why we have to be careful, and we'd better get rid of that poor performance of yours. Hey! What's wrong with my performance? It's definitely not your strong suit, brat. Drake decided to jump into the chatter, to which ISSEI gave the gauntlet a dirty look. Are they coming or not? The man peeked out the door after noticing that he wasn't being followed. His quizzical look changed as the 2 friends quickly followed him. The first thing they felt after crossing the doors was the noticeable increase in music. The next thing they were surprised to see was a woman sitting on the stairs as she watched those entering. Their confused looks crossed each other's eyes. The music was too loud to whisper to each other, but it was obvious what they were thinking. Wasn't mind control not supposed to affect women? The woman gave them a confused look after noticing their stares, so they quickly averted it so as not to arouse suspicion. Thanks to that, they were able to notice something that shocked them, as in front of them was a large crowd of people dancing wildly, composed mostly of men. Start looking. Although he knew young Len wouldn't hear him, ISSEI made a discreet sign with his hand, something his friend seemed to understand. The 2 began to blend into the crowd seamlessly, as they began to dance while their eyes flitted in search of Alan or Raynare. Or so they thought, as their dance steps were pretty bad, so a piercing gaze was soon fixed on them. Jessica couldn't help but hide her smile as she played with her wine glass, observing the main guests. But her gaze soon stopped focusing on young Len, only to fix solely on ISSEI. Her lips licked in a rather dangerous and lascivious manner before she glanced behind her elevated throne. She gave a small nod to the women sitting on the cushions behind her, to which they quickly nodded and got down to business. ISSEI was trying to keep up with the dancing rhythm of the crowd. His eyes were moving in every direction, but the flickering light made it a little difficult for him to see. Even for a demon, that could be a bit annoying. Anyway, he continued to camouflage himself among the partygoers as best he could, sharing a few dance steps and whatnot as he moved along discreetly, but at a good speed. The seconds began to get heavier and heavier as he didn't encounter any familiar faces. At the end, his eyes were fixed towards a double door that was not far away that seemed to be the exit. But he quickly noticed what the difficulty was after noticing how a gleaming throne was waiting for him, or rather, the woman sitting in that place. Sweat began to form on his body after noticing how Jessica was practically raping him with her eyes. She already knows I'm here. His thoughts were put on the back burner when some women appeared in front of him and handed him a drink. ISSEI let his nerves get the better of him and quickly turned away from the women, who started caressing every part of his body and threw the drink away, something that undoubtedly surprised many. Of course, Jessica witnessed this as well, and her depraved smile was no longer present on her face. In fact, the woman looked somewhat annoyed, so she quickly stood up. ISSEI and young Len met in the middle of the party and began dancing together to continue the facade. "Hey, any news?" ISSEI shouted over his ear. "They're not here." Young Len grabbed him by the hands and started to dance together with him to hold the facade better. "Then what do we do?" ISSEI shouted at the top of his lungs, being barely heard by the Korean. The music was really loud. "Did you see the exit? Let's go there." ISSEI nodded, but just as he was about to do so, he could feel someone grab his shoulder roughly and flip him over. His eyes widened slightly as he noticed that the queen was right in front of him, ready to devour him. Her finger ran seductively over his chin as she came dangerously close. "Brat, don't move or we're screwed," Drake shouted inside his mind, to which ISSEI remained completely static, feeling the strange caresses delivered by the woman. "Let's go to my bed. I'm going to tear you apart," Jessica whispered in his ear, her tongue sweeping over much of his cheek in a manner so obscene it would make a fool of any night worker. Surely this was something ISSEI would have wanted under any circumstances. Well, that would have been so had he been the ISSEI of old. His mind, once rotten in perversion, was now only thinking about what was going on. That's exactly why his reaction was the complete opposite of what anyone would expect, as he roughly pushed the woman away when he felt her lips brush against his. The push was so strong that Jessica fell to the ground. Just at that moment the music stopped and everyone was completely silent about what had happened. ISSEI could only look at Jessica, who went from being very surprised to angry, and then looked at her Korean friend, who looked back at her. ISSEI's expression became a puzzle after observing how everyone slowly surrounded them with murderous looks. The piercingly dark silence changed dramatically when Jessica shouted the two words, "Get him!" After hearing that shout, ISSEI did not hesitate to use his gauntlet and strike a strong blow to the jaw of the first man who rushed at him. Thus, both he and young Len began to run as fast as possible, making their way through all those who crossed their path. "You only had to do one thing," the Chinese man shouted at him amidst all the hustle and bustle. "You wanted me to get Ed by that damned witch? What if she bit my tongue out?" ISSEI retorted instantly, catching a man's fist and then throwing it at the angry mob in front. "Are you sure that's the real reason?" the Korean inquired as he continued to push everyone around. "What?" ISSEI tried to retort, but was forced to shut up when a man lunged at him, but he was able to dodge him just in time as he ducked. "We're only going to the damn door." Young Len said nothing on this occasion, making it clear that he agreed with his friend. They were both very focused on escaping, so they didn't notice how Jessica stood strangely on the sidelines as she watched all her slaves try to catch their new toys. After a short but suffocating chase, the two managed to break away from the roaring crowd. "This shit won't open," ISSEI cursed furiously, using one foot as a support to try to open the door. "Just throw it, we don't have much time." Young Len materialized his sickle and quickly began to spin the chain, causing a wind barrier to stop all the unwary men who broke their noses from speeding up. "Agate!" ISSEI shouted angrily as he broke off and aimed his gauntlet. But just before he could do anything crazy, the door opened surprisingly, and revealed a figure that left them frozen. "Strange, he said he wasn't ready yet," Jessica thought with some surprise as she saw someone approaching. The expression on her face changed immediately as she realized it wasn't who she thought it was. Raynare. A smile graced ISSEI's face after seeing her future lover, who simply smiled at her. Apparently, things didn't work out as she thought, and she's on her own. That's a big advantage for us. It's easy to finish her off right now. The fallen angel looked at Jessica, who looked very upset, and even a little scared. Don't you think you're overreacting? ISSEI looked a bit confused after Raynare's bold statement. Believe me, we don't even need to be at 100 to take her down. But if that's what you want, I have a little gift for you. Raynare tossed him a bracelet that quickly transformed into the spear, to which ISSEI could only be surprised. When did you? I don't like to interrupt reunions, but I need a little help here. Young Len interrupted the chatter, a bead of sweat running down his face as he did his best to restrain the controlled people. I'll tell you the details later. Raynare landed next to ISSEI, and so they slowly approached young Len, until he broke through the wind barrier like a strong gust, which sent everyone nearby flying. Now let's focus on taking down the Queen Bee. Young Len and Raynare used their wind and fire powers respectively to break through the crowd while ISSEI advanced in the middle of them both, concentrating a dangerous electric attack on the tip of his spear, which began to emit a deep purple glow. The angry stampede flew off in different directions, most ending up dazed from the blows and slight burns to their bodies. Jessica's face began to darken with more and more fear as she noticed how her slaves were being overcome without much difficulty. That same fear soon turned to great horror, so that she soon found herself taking a couple of steps backwards against her will. And before she knew it, she was already running backwards. Unfortunately for her, her escape ended as quickly as it began when an electrifying slash ripped mercilessly through her chest. Jessica tried to get up, but her attempt came to nothing as she vomited a large amount of blood and fell again. Her blurred vision focused on her throne one last time before the figure of a certain brown-haired man landed in front of her. You were lucky. If they hadn't been immune to my powers but they won't be able to fight William. The woman tried to laugh, but choked on her own blood. That bastard will fall, just like you did. ISSEI closed his eyes, giving a slight sigh as he prepared to deliver the final blow. What's the matter, are you afraid of killing? The woman didn't waste her chance to mock him as she saw his pulse on the spear tremble. You are right. It's the first time. ISSEI opened his eyes again, his gaze as hard as iron. And I must thank you, for this first time will be easy enough to overcome. Jessica's smile faded after hearing those words. What? That was the woman's last word, as a large amount of blood shot out of her body. Raynare felt a couple of drops splash on her face, but she did not even flinch. Young Len was also watching his friend silently, who was slowly recomposing his posture, his gaze focused on the blood-covered spear. Help me with the unconscious. Raynare commented silently, to which young Len only nodded. After arranging all the victims, ISSEI finally finished looking at Jessica's body and approached his friends. Will they be all right? Raynare watched him out of the corner of her eye for a moment, assessing if they were really all right. They're a little banged up, but it shouldn't be a big deal to them. You only need to look at the scars on their bodies to see that, clarified the fallen angel, to which ISSEI couldn't help but lower his gaze. At least they are no longer under that woman's control. Young Len joined the conversation. Back to the main topic. Did you find anything besides your soul and the spear? Most of the stuff was burned, but I found quite a bit of useful information. Raynare pulled out a couple of papers, to which they both looked at her with intrigue. First, there's this woman's sacred gear. She was actually one of William's first victims, but she acquired some kind of strange obsession with him, which led her to become his subordinate. The power she had was quite dangerous, as it allowed her to control the mind of any man in a very wide radius. But it had a small disadvantage. Raynare paused a little dramatically, as if pondering whether it was a good idea to say this or not just for them. Internally she was also feeling quite uneasy about it, something her two friends didn't overlook. If it's a disadvantage, why are you making that face? ISSEI asked, his brows furrowed in confusion. Well, control doesn't work on men who are in love. The bomb was dropped without further ado, to which ISSEI's eyes widened slightly. Wait, are you in love? ISSEI's sudden question made them both look at young Len intensely. I don't like women. The Chinese man's blunt and unhesitating answer made the earlier surprise look ridiculous, so a moment of somewhat awkward silence ensued. Well, that explains a lot. ISSEI broke the mood as he rubbed his hair with a nervous smile. You know what? Let's not waste any more time with gossip. There's something much more important I have to tell you. Raynare's words caught the full interest of both of them. We heard you. ISSEI answered without hesitation, although inwardly he was relieved to have ignored the interrogation that was coming his way. He didn't need to probe much either, he was sure to whom his heart belonged. The problem was that he wasn't willing to admit it in front of her. First of all, you need to know that this strange doctor is actually William, Raynare declared as she searched through several of her papers, something that surprised both of them quite a bit, although young Len didn't show it as much. Are you serious? But that guy was no more than 30 years old, and William by now should be a decrepit old man. ISSEI exclaimed, somewhat elated after such a discovery. I don't understand it very well either. A lot of the papers are badly damaged. But considering what Azazel told us, it's most likely that he managed to rejuvenate himself through one of his experiments. Speaking of those experiments, here's a rather important piece of information. Raynare reached the last leaf, and it was the one that was the least damaged. The fallen angel paused to look at young Len. That strange look she gave him only generated more intrigue in the Korean. What's wrong? It's nothing, just. Raynare kept a short silence as she refocused her gaze on the document. There's a woman who has the same last name as yours. What? Young Len's surprise changed to a hopeful smile as he quickly went over to read the document. Specimen number 127, race 3, Batari Sun. Young Len's hands clenched tightly after reading the name. Experiment numbers, 1879. Unlike the others, she was able to break through the barrier between the two energies, but there is still a long way to go. She must be treated with special care, so constant rehabilitations are required to maintain her value. I need you to keep an eye on her care in the lab, Jessica. Wait, does that mean your sister is still alive? A smile camouflaged behind the brown man's astonishment, to which young Len looked at him with complete seriousness. We have to go back to the lab. The rumble of quick, continuous footsteps were heard more steadily as they climbed each step, until at last they reached the large room ahead. Raynare, ISSEI, and young Len stopped outside once they arrived, their eyes focused on the rather shattered laboratory. What the hell happened in this place? ISSEI was the first to ask. I wondered the same thing. Raynare clarified, observing that the place seemed to be just as she had left it. Do you think my sister is all right? Asked a rather worried young Len. There is only one way to find out. ISSEI was the first to venture into the lab, but quickly stopped when a loud tremor caught everyone's attention. What was that? Raynare cautiously inquired. I don't know, maybe some fault in the ship. ISSEI's answer was put on the back burner, as a loud explosion shattered a large portion of the stairs behind them. Their postures changed in an instant when they thought it was an enemy, but they were surprised to see Alan emerge from the dust. Hey, that's what I call lucky! Alan exclaimed with a smile after running into his friends. Alan? How did you get here? Did you have a map or something? Asked Raynare, who looked as surprised as ISSEI. To be honest, I have no idea what happened. One moment I felt numb and out of nowhere I appeared in a completely different place. I felt like I was back to my old ways once again. The Argentinian commented while rubbing his chin. In the end I got tired of going around in circles, so I had the excellent idea of blowing up all the floors above me. That way, at some point I'd make it to the outside. What kind of stupid idea is that? ISSEI approached him with a confused expression on his face. Are you going to deny that it works? Alan pleaded with another question. We don't have time for this. My sister is on some of those stretchers right now. Young Len clarified, focusing his gaze inside the lab. Is your sister alive? I mean, I always hoped so, brother. But commented a rather surprised Alan. It's a long story. I'll tell it to you while we search, declared Raynare. I think it's a good idea. It's a long search, commented a somewhat anxious ISSEI as he saw the large number of stretchers that were covered with curtains full of blood. He didn't know if he wanted to see what was behind, and those doubts became irrefutable when he had to hold back the urge to vomit after opening the first curtains. The image was so morbid and disgusting that it wasn't even worth describing. Everyone else encountered similar images, but their previous experiences allowed them not to be overcome with disgust. Holy shit, Alan whispered after opening the seventh gurney, and on it he pulled out two strange gems that were covered with somewhat thick and disgusting blood. What are these things, and why do their bodies look like they've been blown up? ISSEI pulled out two gems and a strange, somewhat broken necklace from one of William's many victims. Those are sacred gears. Everyone looked at Raynare after her answer. Apparently, they have an excessive concentration of sacred energy. They must have been manipulated somehow. I see, that's why I feel this uneasiness, ISSEI commented suspiciously as he threw the objects away. Anyway, that doesn't explain the reason for their bodies reacting this way. That ing sucks. Alan clarified, closing the curtains again to stop watching such a scene. I don't know. I don't understand much about sacred gears. That's something we'll have to ask Azazel about. It won't be necessary. Everyone's body froze instantly as they turned around to witness the image of a gloved hand clinging to the frame of the destroyed door. I will answer those questions myself. William's figure emerged from the shadows, a calm smile gracing his face. But curiously, that smile generated millions of chills in those present. His attire that covered his entire body except for his face didn't help either. 16. The Sacred Path to the Twisted. First of all, let me congratulate you on taking Jessica down. William began to applaud with clear sarcasm. How can you applaud the death of your own partner? ISSEI accused through gritted teeth, to which William simply bowed his shoulders. Because I had it coming. I told her 1,000 times that she shouldn't be a conformist, but she never listened to me. She always depended on that trinket inside her body and never wanted to unlock its true potential. She was just trying to make me fall in love like an idiot, the man clarified with a slight shake of the head at the end, as if Jessica's death was a simple anecdote for him. But let me warn you one thing, I am not like Jessica. The man's always narrowed eyes widened, his once cheerful tone sounding much harsher, causing everyone to take a step back in shock. Well, I'm going off the deep end. William's tone returned to normal. Earlier, the pretty woman left them with a half-hearted explanation. The bodies implode because they don't have the expected resistance. Those corpses are of the people who didn't even make it through the first test. My sister Jyanzein's fists began to tremble. My sister had to cross almost 2,000 of these probes. Damned bad bastard. Jyanzein was about to venture to attack the man in a great fit of rage, but Alan managed to stop him just in time. Idiot, don't let yourself be controlled by your emotions or we'll all end up dead, exclaimed the Argentinian through gritted teeth, something that made the Korean man think twice. Oh? So you're his brother? Unfortunately, I don't remember anything about your family, but I find it strange that I didn't take you with me back then. Surely you would be as special as your sister. Do you know why? The man's calm smile changed to a grim one. Because she's the only one who advanced on the sacred path. Sacred path? What are you saying? Who asked Alan, to which William could only raise his two hands in complete pride. The sacred path is what will allow us to stop being sinners, not only humans, but also fallen angels, and even demons. It's the glorious future that everyone refuses to accept because they are worldly beings. But don't worry, I, the emissary of God, have come to purify all the souls of these heathens and sinners. William concluded his speech with a maniacal smile. God's emissary? Great, he's out of his ing mind. Alan commented with great disgust. The holy weapons. Raynare fixed her gaze on the sacred gears lying on the floor, her eyes widening at the revelation. That's right, the fallen angel gets it. William pointed at her with great elation. These sacred devices created by God will allow us to purge our rotten blood. This gift is what will guide us on the sacred path to reach the gates of paradise. Wait. Are you saying that you killed all these people just so they would absorb the sacred energy of the sacred gears? That's completely impossible. Raynare accused him, her eyes showing how bewildered she was, as were her friends. That's where you're wrong, my dear fallen. William pulled a button from his tunic, a peculiar smile emerging on his face. But don't feel guilty, there was a time when I thought of giving up too. But that's where she came in. William pressed the button, and everyone was forced to look back as they felt the wall move. Watch. Everyone's eyes began to widen progressively, to the point where disbelief could not fit in their bodies. Behold my greatest experiment. Behold the first chosen one of God who managed to assimilate more than 1,800 pure sacred gears in her body. William's laughter echoed in the background as he focused on the body of Bora, who lay hanging on the wall. But what was most striking was not her bloody medical gown or her unconsciousness, but the fact that half of her long hair was a blonde color, while the other half was black. Although, without a doubt, what left everyone speechless were her fallen angel wings. Therein lay the problem, a rather big and inexplicable one. One of her wings was as black as night, but the other was a glowing golden color that radiated great purity. Shouldn't this be impossible? She's half angel and half fallen angel. ISSEI wondered, a question I'm sure everyone was asking themselves. Apparently, God's death brought many more side effects than they thought. Drake commented telepathically. What did you do to her? Jyanzein could feel the words choking in his throat. Are you not proud of your sister? She's one of a kind. Nevertheless, the man rubbed his two gloved hands together, his smile widening slightly. There are some people who are not meant to walk this path. I believe you are trying very hard to be one of them. Everyone fixed their gazes on William. Alan was forced to stop Jyanzein once again, but this time it was enough to grab him by the shoulder. I've had enough of your bullshit. You're just a brainless lunatic. Raynare accused with a hostile tone, the ring in her hand transformed into the flaming sword. I guess I'll be forced to kill two of you. Perhaps that way you will finally learn your lesson. The man clarified, crossing his arms with a broad, provocative smile. Young Len did not hesitate to launch himself at William. His sickle materialized on his hand and he threw the chain with a forceful force to the front, and surprisingly, William remained without moving a muscle. The heavy impact fell on his head like the force of a mighty storm, as the ground around him cracked to a great extent. Did it hit him? A human would never be able to withstand such a blow. A somewhat surprised Raynare asked herself, as the hardest fight had apparently been the easiest. She soon realized that she was far from right. Everyone's eyes widened as the sickle flew off into the dust, and was followed by young Len, who had spat blood. "I knew it wasn't a good idea to rush in," Alan exclaimed, swinging at William with his wind sword. "Wait, this isn't right. I'm sure that attack hit him," commented ISSEI, who had stayed in the rear after what he had witnessed. Alan's first slash created a strong blizzard that dissipated all the dust, and his face covered with disbelief did not wait when he saw how William was stopping the attack only with his hands. "You are very slow," the heretic declared before giving him a hard knee that forced him to fall to his knees. "I hope God finds a way to guide your soul." William was preparing to deliver a killing blow, but just then Raynare emerged from a jump and waved his sword with a speed greater than he had witnessed from his two previous attackers, something that surprised him a little. Still, he was reactive enough to use his forearm as a block, so the metal produced a rather peculiar clashing sound before releasing a large amount of flames that should have scorched William. "That's all you've got?" Raynare's eyes widened beyond measure after seeing how the man's arm had been exposed, but it was a rather putrid and unpleasant color. William reacted instantly as he grabbed Raynare's sword to throw it away, thus giving a strong kick to young Len and Alan to drive them away, who wanted to ram him with a powerful joint wind attack. The heretic did not waste a second and threw himself on Raynare to not give her a second of respite. Thus the fallen angel barely had time to land, as she quickly turned around and embedded her sword in the ground to contain a strong punch that went straight to her abdomen. The torrent of flames soon emerged once again, engulfing the man's entire figure. How can this be possible? Her thoughts flashed across her incredulous face as she was forced to hold back another blow from William, as the fire apparently did not hurt him. Raynare began to be dragged backwards by the force and speed of the punches she could barely contain, making her feel more and more cornered, until she finally hit a stretcher, something that completely unsettled. Her teeth clenched hard as the impending blow was inches from her face. Plaque! William's smile vanished immediately when he saw how his arm had not only been deflected, but also pierced by true Longinus. The exorcist tried to react as quickly as possible, but the strong blow of wind that young Len and Alan gave him caught him completely off guard, so he went flying to the side until he hit a wall. "Take care of your sister, we'll make sure she doesn't get in the way." ISSEI was the one who gave the orders, to which everyone seemed to agree. "It seems that your spear is the only one capable of hurting him. You'll have to lead the attack, we'll cover you," Raynare declared, standing behind ISSEI along with Alan. "Aren't we supposed to have already cut him to pieces with our attacks?" Alan asked the question on everyone's mind. "Should have," Raynare clarified simply. William emerged through the curtain of dust, brushing the debris off his shoulders. "As I guessed, that weapon is the only one that can do anything to me." The heretic's eyes narrowed lazily as he fixed his gaze on ISSEI. "I suppose I'll be forced to hurt you a little if I want to win." "What? How is it possible that the cut on his arm is gone?" Raynare shared her doubts with more than palpable disbelief. ISSEI and Alan noticed the lack of wounds on the exorcist, but they couldn't even do anything about it, as the man launched himself straight towards ISSEI with a leap that cracked the floor a bit. The brown-haired man took an involuntary step backwards and the gem in his gauntlet glowed with utmost intensity. Boost! William put his two hands together and made a devastating downward attack that ISSEI could barely hold back with the spear, causing his legs to sink to his knees from the impact. William was forced back a couple of meters when he received a strong wind attack from Alan, but he wasted no time and launched himself at the three, who quickly surrounded him. Still, William was just making sure to dodge ISSEI's attacks, completely ignoring the others as he threw punches with his arms towards the three, and despite being at a large numerical difference, William wasn't showing much difficulty in holding them off. In fact, he was slowly sweeping them away with his extreme strength, especially ISSEI, who in almost every exchange was forced to retreat. "Sis! Bora, it's my..." Young Len removed the shackles with his sickle chains, to which Bora fell into his arms. Young Len continued to insist a couple more times, but this time he slapped her lightly. His worried face changed rather quickly as he watched Bora show signs of waking up. "Bora, thank goodness. You don't know how much I've missed you. I thought I would never see you again." Young Len could feel his tears forming, but unlike the previous times, it was no longer painful. Relief and happiness was the only thing reigning in his ever unruly emotions. What? Bora's eyes opened wide, although she was still quite exhausted. Who are you? It's me, your brother! Exclaimed the Korean with a big smile, and Bora's tiredness seemed to disappear after hearing such a statement. Young Len? Shit! The brothers' reunion was interrupted when ISSEI flew past them, followed closely by William. The exorcist readied a machine gun of punches in an effort to knock him out of the air, but Raynare arrived just in time to split the job. How annoying! For the first time William showed some genuine anger, but that didn't stop his quick and powerful attacks. Thanks. Raynare replied with a somewhat forced smile as she took care of the man's right arm, while ISSEI took care of the left. You're just foolish brats who don't understand God's grace. William fired for no reason, delivering 2 simultaneous blows covered in fury that threw the two to the ground with remarkable speed. Raynare managed to land on her feet, but ISSEI was not so lucky. While she was able to dodge William's devastating fall without much trouble, Alan found it necessary to grab ISSEI by the leg and drag him like a stick, something that earned the brown-haired man's surprised screams. Thank you? ISSEI got up as fast as he could, watching as William approached at full speed. Thank you? You owe me big, Alan said with a half-smile. Are those your friends? Bora asked, rather surprised, and even stunned, as she was having a hard time processing everything that was happening. I could say yes. I'd like to keep talking to you, but I have to help. Young Lin gently laid her down on the ground, and Bora reached out her hand to him after watching him walk away. Bora was still too puzzled to understand what was happening. Maybe after all these years of absolute suffering she would finally be able to see the sunlight once again. Alan, ISSEI and Raynare were fighting at the same time against William, stopping all his attacks and doing their best to harm him, but every attempt seemed to be futile. The man was only focused on dodging ISSEI's attacks and attacking without looking at him. He was almost like an impenetrable wall, and as if that wasn't enough, his speed seemed to be increasing. Alan's teeth clenched as one of the attacks grazed his right hand, but that was enough to shatter his wrist and send him away. Raynare felt a deep gash open up in her abdomen before being ejected at full speed. ISSEI had been left alone before he could even realize it. Now, all the attacks focused on him didn't give him time to react properly. His expression changed noticeably as the 2 blurred attacks were directed against him at full speed, being barely able to hold back one of them. Still, he had enough reaction to use his gauntlet to defend the blow on his abdomen, but his posture was completely broken and the attack had been so forceful that it left him airless and floating adrift. In short, he was completely vulnerable to William's next body-shattering blow. ISSEI's eyes widened beyond measure as a large explosion of dust from the blow appeared. The brown-haired man went flying at a gradual speed until he finally fell to the ground. That brat, William thought as he removed his hand from the cracked ground. He saved him just in time. ISSEI got up from the ground without much trouble, as if he hadn't suffered a fatal blow. In fact, you only needed to see the sickle that was wrapped around his waist to know what had happened. That was amazing, ISSEI commented with a smile, watching as young Len landed next to him. Don't get used to it. The fact that it worked was pure luck. The Korean dematerialized the weapon and materialized it in his other hand. Are you alright? Raynare reached Alan's side, who was holding his right hand with an annoyed expression. That's what I should ask, the Argentinian commented, seeing how Raynare's now exposed abdomen had a deep cut. Don't worry, I can go on. Raynare held on to her sword even tighter, to which Alan smiled. Then I can do it too. Well, it's time to use the heavy artillery, ISSEI declared in complete seriousness. The spear shifted to his left hand, thus leaving his gauntlet free to start creating a dragon shot. Are you sure? We won't be able to help you if you use those attacks. Young Len clarified the problem of going so straight ahead. You saw it, his defense is insane. The only way to defeat him is to offer a brute force greater than his. Isn't that right, Drake? ISSEI gave a small smile after mentioning the dragon's name. I understand how you think, companion. And while your idea is not a bad one, I won't take responsibility if something happens to you. Drake commented in a relaxed tone. Those words fill me with confidence, you lizard with legs. ISSEI replied with a sarcastic tone. What did you call me, Drake? Where have I heard that name before, and why can that sacred gear talk? William wondered in his thoughts rather curiously, but said curiosity faded and turned into a smile covered in madness. I definitely can't lose such a valuable specimen as you are, hi to ISSEI. Here I come! ISSEI shouted with complete conviction once he started running against William, to which Alan and Raynare looked surprised. ISSEI's hand tightened its grip on the spear, causing the metal blade to begin to give off an increasingly luminous violet glow. Are he really going to attack head-on? Alan exclaimed rather exalted. I don't think you're a very clever offspring. William sneered at him before attacking him with a powerful right. Everyone was surprised to see how ISSEI used the gauntlet to cover the impact area. Even so, the blow was hard enough to make him kneel on the ground and the gauntlet cracked badly. But that was far from stopping him. You fall! ISSEI fanned the spear at a great speed, which generated an electric slash that sliced both of William's arms like paper to everyone's surprise, something that left him completely exposed. The chestnut did not hesitate to aim with his damaged gauntlet to finish the job, but just at that moment a strange smile was drawn on the man, something that only Raynare perceived. ISSEI, watch out! The dragon shot dissipated into mere particles as the boosted gear was completely destroyed by the deadly blow it received on its abdomen, as William's arms had regenerated from one second to the next, though they now looked more morbid and inhuman. ISSEI vomited a large amount of blood before shooting out like a bullet, crashing into several debris. The chestnut spat out some blood, his daze more than obvious, so he could only watch as William lunged at him, ready to deliver the blow that would knock him out. To ISSEI's luck, Raynare and Alan arrived in time to stop his attack, though that luck fell short when William struck with his other arm, causing them both to drop to their knees and ISSEI to spit out some blood as the pressure landed on his abdomen. How does he have more strength than before? Alan grumbled through gritted teeth, doing his best to try to push William away from ISSEI, something that seemed impossible. William's smirk changed as chains wrapped around his neck. The fact that young Len had leverage from behind was the respite Raynare and Alan needed to repel the exorcist. Young Len took advantage of his moment of vulnerability while in the air and began spinning him at full speed, until he slammed him hard into the ground, generating a huge dust-up. Why did his damn arms regenerate? ISSEI shouted with great annoyance, getting up with clear difficulty. There's your answer. Raynare pointed to William's severed arms, which were turning to acid, thus revealing several pearls. Sacred gears? How many of them? ISSEI was speechless at what he had just witnessed. Apparently, this madman also did experiments on himself to try to become an angel. Alan commented seriously. Do you think he succeeded? ISSEI asked, reactivating his boosted gear. The only thing I'm certain of is that he's no longer human. Alan commented, observing how William's amorphous arms made their presence felt among all the dust. His arms separately were capable of surpassing the size of his own body. So how did we deliberate? Young Len asked cautiously. Just destroy it. Raynare commented simply before running at full speed. I knew it would dilute that. Young Len commented with an exhausted look, then followed his friend. Aha! William jerked his head in the direction of the sound, watching as Raynare emerged through the dust cloud along with young Len. The first thing he did was to catch Raynare with his giant hand and then throw her away. It barely took a second for him to grab the sickle with his other hand, and a somewhat terrified smile appeared on his face. The exorcist returned his previous attack with his own weapon as he slammed it into the ground, causing the floor to cave in from the heavy impact. William wasted no time and quickly turned around to not only repel Alan's attack, but also plunge him to the ground, something that caused him to vomit a large amount of blood. William's smile disappeared as Alan's wind sword expanded into a large air current that imprisoned him, something that brought out a rather peculiar grin on the Argentinian. Dragon shot. A strong burst of energy appeared in a reddish halo until it hit the ceiling, generating the biggest explosion of the battle so far. I thought you'd never make it. Alan commented with a half-smile, barely able to stand. Sorry, it's not ready yet. ISSEI stated, alluding to the purple glow of the spear, which was slowly starting to create lightning. I just hope you don't fail like last time. I don't think we can save your ass one more time. Raynare approached him, spitting out some blood. I just need a clean hit. More than half of my magic is going towards this attack, and if I miss it will most likely be doomed. ISSEI thought, his expression turning a bit grim. Ha 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 ha. The booming laughter was accompanied by a big blizzard, revealing William, who was standing on the big hole left by the attack on the roof. It's the first time I've had to deal with such unruly offspring. The heretic's gaze was fixed on the small group. His eyes fixed on Bora for a moment, but his concentration quickly returned to his most troublesome enemy. Young Len, Alan, give me a hand. ISSEI reinforced his stance as his two friends nodded to him. Alan began to create a small vortex on his wind sword, while young Len absorbed the excess elemental energy, causing the chains and the sickle itself to turn a white color. ISSEI's eyes narrowed for a short second as he saw the man remove his half-shredded t-shirt, revealing a most bizarre-looking abdomen. Apparently, he was able to absorb the dragon shot with his strange body. But I doubt he can do the same with this attack, the brown man thought, a thin smile crossing his lips after his last words. If they don't come, then I'll come for you, William shouted with a sickly smile, raising his arms like a madman before rushing at them with an incredible leap. Now! Young Len shouted through gritted teeth as he wrapped ISSEI around his waist and sent him flying with a burst of speed that was powered by Alan's small vortex. The extreme speed of both sides meant that they were face to face in just a second, so the time to maneuver was almost non-existent. Just as they were about to impart an unprecedented impact, ISSEI's eyes widened. Not yet! ISSEI changed strategy just at the last second, pointing his gauntlet toward the ground. Dragon shot. The attack was barely noticeable because he didn't have time to create it, but that thin bolt of lightning hitting the ground was helpful enough to get the immediate extra boost he needed. The usual smile on William's face slowly changed to clear confusion as he watched ISSEI tower over him, dodging his deadly attack just in time. ISSEI spun around on himself and materialized his wings to stay in the air, thus watching as William slammed into the ground, generating a strong tremor throughout the area and the flying of several debris. William did not hesitate for a second to jump again to catch it, shooting out of the dust curtain at full speed. But this time it was different. The lightning bolts on the spear would pronounce significantly, causing an almost imperceptible smile to appear on ISSEI's face. Instead of preparing to dodge, ISSEI reasserted his stance and threw a downward slash. The timing was more than perfect, as the spear struck over the knuckles of the attack that would likely leave him on the verge of defeat. From there everything went much slower. William's smile slowly began to fade as his arm went further and further, but it wasn't working the way he would have wanted it to. The spear was splitting his arm in two. In fact, it wasn't the only thing snapping in two. An electric slash shot out from the spear at an electrifying speed through William's body, who wasn't even able to react as his body split into two perfect halves, thus flooding ISSEI, who had watched the two halves pass through his two sides before they disappeared through the gap in the ceiling, with blood. The spear attack was so powerful that it went through all the floors of the large ship until it emerged from the other end, thus disappearing from sight before anyone is even able to see it. Everyone was completely frozen after what they witnessed, as it was impossible for them to react in a proper way. What the was that? Raynare was the one who asked the question on everyone's mind. That was the true Longinus. ISSEI answered with a smile, wiping the excess blood off his face. ISSEI's smile faded after hearing a sound coming from above his back, and the airs of victory collapsed along with the ceiling when a giant fist hit him squarely, causing him to spit out quite a bit of blood. ISSEI! Raynare screamed in horror as she moved as fast as she could to catch him before he hit the ground. Her task was accomplished just in time, but the debris from the ceiling fell on top of them, to the desperate sight of their friends. However, they never had time to process the situation properly, as a gigantic, grotesque figure fell to the ground, causing a small tremor. Alan, young Len and Bora's eyes widened in disbelief as they saw deformed wings projecting behind the creature. The most distinguishable thing among all the dust cloud was the golden glow emerging from them. I never thought that the shape of an angel would be like this. The monstrous voice made everyone take a step back. It's definitely a kind of beauty and perfection that my mind, still fouled with worldly thoughts, cannot comprehend. What the? The first to react was Alan, although his sentence was half-hearted, as the amorphous being took a big step forward, thus revealing much of its appearance. His skin was an almost blackish-brown color. His stature was one of the points that stood out the most, as he was taller than an average two-story house. The second highlight was the deformed golden-colored wings on his back, and the last highlight was the large number of sacred gears peeking over his morbid body. The man no longer had clothes, he didn't even have eyes. In fact, he didn't even look like a man. He's a ing monster. Alan completed the description of the giant beast in front of them. Clearly your eyes are even further away from seeing divine revelation than I thought. William recited in an unnaturally low tone, his giant head lowered slightly, though so did much of his body since he now had no neck. Now that I have brought down the mightiest, it is time to punish the sinners. God demands 2 offerings, and you happen to be 2. I just need to get it out of the way. Bora realized he was talking about her, so she quickly got in the way to prevent the monster from attacking, something that surprised the 2 men. You'll only hurt him if you step over my corpse, you walking piece of shit. Bora exclaimed with a vipid lip, revealing a part of her personality that even surprised Alan himself. That's not good, Bora. How many times have I told you to correct that vocabulary? That's why God still doesn't accept you as one of his children. I'd rather die than become a ing asshole monster. Alan and young Len looked at each other after the woman's extravagant accent. Are you sure she's your sister? The inevitable question sprang to Alan's lips. I don't know what's going on, but that thing is not moving. Raynare whispered to herself as she peered out from a small hole, as the debris had left a small space where she and ISSEI stood. "Companion, are you all right?" Drake's tone sounded genuinely concerned. "Don't worry, it's just a bump." ISSEI tried to act tough, but his head fell back into Raynare's lap as he coughed up some blood. "Stay here, even if it's just for a while," Raynare commented rather worriedly. "And what will you do?" "I'm the only one who can harm him." ISSEI knelt down as best he could and stood in front of her. "I know that," but Raynare's answer was half-hearted. ISSEI could see how her hands clenched with clear helplessness. ISSEI thought it best to keep a short silence, so he just rested his hand on her shoulder to try to reassure her. "Hey, I know what Rick is, that's why we have to give it our all so that it doesn't happen again," ISSEI commented in a careful tone, watching as Raynare shook her head. "It's not just us. It's all of them, the people. If we fail," Raynare fell silent again, and this time ISSEI couldn't find the words. Honestly, he himself had thought a few moments ago that if the last attack didn't work, then nothing would. But as if those silent pleas had been heard, a saving voice resounded from the least expected object. "So you just want power to save those innocents?" Both ISSEI and Raynare were surprised to see how the flaming sword of the fall was apparently speaking. "What? What would you give in return?" Raynare was interrupted by the male-looking voice, so she simply lowered her head. "If I could save them," Raynare paused a little to hold on even tighter to the sword. "I am even willing to give my life if necessary," the voice hummed, as if pondering the answer. That voice, it can't be. That's why the aura sounded so familiar. Drake's voice echoed over her mind, to which ISSEI couldn't help but become more confused than he already was. "Do you know anything about this, Drake?" ISSEI spoke to his partner telepathically. "Of course. Honestly, I never thought he'd team up with that old crow. At first, I had my doubts about you. But from what I see, Azazel wasn't wrong about you." The male voice sounded more cheerful. "Then let me lend you my power, my friend." Just at that moment, a thin reddish aura began to surround Raynare, making her eyes widen as she felt her strength growing steadily. "His name is Drake's," voice echoed inside ISSEI's mind. "How did this?" I think it was something like this." The sword glowed even brighter, to the point that the aura turned into flames. Debris flew everywhere, and William was forced to turn around after feeling an unbearable heat lashing him from behind. Endless flaming chains appeared all along the battlefield, and the suffocating aura of the flames left everyone speechless. All they could do was gawk as all those scattered chains wrapped around Raynare's arms and waist, who was enclosed in a sea of flames, but received no damage. "What the?" ISSEI could only cover his face, trying to take in everything that had just happened. "Hayadu, right? You'd better back off a bit, since she's not used to using this power yet." Fafner's voice made the chains glow a deeper golden color, something that amazed both ISSEI and Raynare. "Do as he says, mate." Drake's voice brought ISSEI to his senses, and he backed away as fast as he could. "Hey!" William's angry voice made Raynare stop looking at his hands. "Turn off those damn chains. You're burning the few things that were still salvageable in this lab." After listening to the man's complaints, Raynare observed how the tips of several chains were burning some stretchers and other papers, even burning some sacred gears that were scattered around the ruined place. Although the idea of listening to him did not please her, Raynare closed her eyes in an attempt to control the flames, but all she managed to do was to make the fire spread with even more energy. "It's just as Fafner said, I can't control this power properly?" Raynare thought, her brow furrowed when she saw how several chains approached her body. "What the hell are you doing, you damned idiot? You definitely don't deserve to know God's grace." For the first time, William was really angry and lunged at the fallen angel with such a monstrous leap that he sent Alan, young Len and Bora, who were standing nearby, flying. "Quick, use the chains." Fafner's voice made Raynare's body tense up, so she soon used her wings to move against William. "I'll change my mind, you'll be the first," William exclaimed, smiling a monstrous grin. "Hey, when I said to use the chains, this is not what I meant," Fafner exclaimed somewhat anxiously as he watched all the chains wrap around Raynare's arm, thus forming a gigantic fist. "I'm sorry, even I don't know what I'm doing," Raynare shouted back, but her sympathetic expression did not change for a moment. The two fists of equal size collided with each other, generating a powerful shockwave that quickly turned into blizzards covered in golden fire. "What the?" William was genuinely surprised for the first time to feel that his brute strength had been matched. "Okay, I admit this is a bit funny," Fafner's voice echoed amidst all the commotion that the clash of forces was generating. In the end, something incredible happened when William could no longer withstand Raynare's strength and was thrown backwards, crashing into various debris until he was embedded against the wall. She could beat him. They all thought at the same time, quite astonished by what they had just witnessed. Raynare fell to the ground and gave a small sigh to relax, making all the chains disappear, except for one that did not stop surrounding her waist at any time. I think I'm starting to understand a little bit how they work now, thought the Fallen with a smile on her face. Wow, a sinister grin emerged on William's face as he slowly climbed out of the wall. I thought I had figured it out, but you have a talking sacred gear too. But unlike that Sprout, your weapon isn't linked to your soul, so I can kill you without a problem. Are you sure you can kill me that easily? Raynare answered with a question. Even a simple process can take time. I'm going to prove it to you. The monster finished with a creepy grin, causing a corrupt divine aura to surround him. I can't wait to see it. Raynare gave a faint smile before starting to expel her own aura. William didn't hesitate to lunge forward to try to hit her, but Raynare used one of her hands to materialize a large amount of chains with the intention of trapping his arm and deflecting the blow, which she succeeded in doing. William's smile vanished when he saw how Raynare appeared at his side in the blink of an eye and delivered a strong giant punch with her other arm, causing him to roll on the floor. He was barely able to sit up before he took another heavy blow, but this time it wasn't a giant arm made of chains, but the chains themselves, of which there were not a few. William slowly began to recoil from the impact of all the flaming steels crashing into different parts of his body in heaps, generating small explosions of fire. But surprisingly, he managed to adjust his pace a bit, so he managed to catch a large part of the chains with his two hands. I caught you. A maniacal grin appeared on the monster's face before pulling the chains with all his strength, something that took Raynare by surprise. Anyway, that was far from stopping her. That was proven when a huge amount of chains materialized on her leg, thus delivering a strong kick to his groin that resounded like a bang, earning a loud gritting of teeth in response. That had to hurt, Fafnir exclaimed, being accompanied by the clanking of his chains. Don't you think if that thing had balls we would have noticed by now? Raynare asked the obvious question after returning to his position, since the monster was completely naked. That's a good point. Don't you think it would be pretty funny to have a chance to play target practice with them? Fafnir replied with a small laugh. What the hell are they talking about? ISSEI wondered with several nervous beads of sweat. Let's just say that Fafnir has a rather special sense of humor, Drake commented, his tone denoting the disappointment hidden within his words. Raynare lunged at the stunned monster, delivering a barrage of lashes with dozens of chains, instructing them with the mere wave of her hand. William's continued staggering let it be understood that the blows were affecting him, but there was still something odd in the midst. The first to notice it was Alan, who couldn't help but frown. Raynare continued with endless unbridled attacks without any respite, driving William back endlessly, to the point where he was cornered against a wall. But just as the fight seemed to be tilting in Raynare's favor, a rather ghoulish and singular grin emerged on the monster. Plaff! The loud and deadly blow resounded over the whole place. Everyone's hope turned to despair as Raynare spat out a large amount of blood after receiving the punch full on, something that sent her crawling to the other end of the lab. Raynare! What happened? ISSEI's calmness returned when he saw that Raynare was back on her feet. But that calm didn't last long when he noticed something quite peculiar, and that was that she was breathing with a very unusual agitation. Fafnir, isn't there a way to consume less magic in this form? The question caused a rather serious hum to emerge from the single chain that was encircling her waist. I'm sorry, but there isn't. And it's not just your magic, your stamina is also dropping very quickly. This is unavoidable, as you are not used to this power. The Dragon King clarified, causing his bearer to click her tongue. What's the matter? Did you get tired so quickly already? I was hoping you could hold out for a few more minutes. William sneered, then clenched his fists tightly. If you won't come for me, then I'll come for you. Raynare reacted instantly, thus throwing endless chains that materialized with the simple movement of her arm. But this time, the whiplash resounded in a loud sonorous burst as William grabbed it with his hand, something that left everyone speechless. As I said before, the same trick doesn't work on me twice. The monster's tone unfolded an icy sensation around her. Raynare was barely able to react when William threw her upwards with the help of the chains, so she was forced to dematerialize them and spread her wings. Unfortunately, she barely had time to cross her arms and X to try to hold back the strong punch that landed on her body, though that only remained as an attempt. That became quite clear when she shot off to the ground with terrifying speed, causing much of the ground to crack after her fall. Quick, get up! Fafnir's shout made Raynare react, so she got to her knees to make an impromptu jump. Although it was somewhat hurried, that movement was enough to dodge most of the blow, but that didn't stop her from flying and colliding with several pieces of debris in the air. Raynare's dazed gaze was fixed on William, who was already flying in her direction at full speed. Eat this, you piece of shit! Alan's shout was followed by a loud magical blast covered in wind that passed over her. Raynare's eyes could not help but widen as she watched that great attack impact on William, who had no choice but to recoil from the great pressure the blizzard was exerting on him. When she turned her gaze around, she quickly realized that it had not only been Alan's doing, as young Len was creating a constant flow of wind with the swing of his sickle to support him. In short, it looked like a giant and quite powerful fan. Why are they resisting so much? How determined are they to ruin paradise? William complained with enough energy, though not enough to turn away from the torrent of magic. ISSEI. A faint smile crossed Raynare's lips as she saw that her future lover was no longer having such difficulty moving. Hey, I know this might sound like a very idiotic idea, but I need you to use all your power. It doesn't matter if it drains you in a matter of seconds. ISSEI shouted as loud as he could, as the strong draft was determined to cut off any kind of dialogue. Are you crazy? Raynare responded in the way everyone expected. Just trust me. Me and Drake have come up with an incredible plan. ISSEI gave her a toothy grin, to which Raynare was a bit surprised by his apparent overconfidence. Aya! You damn crawling rats, I've had enough of you. William showed his true colors again before breaking the magical attack that held him imprisoned, causing Alan and young Len to fall to their knees. Hell, my magic reserves are in the shit. Alan cursed through gritted teeth. I hope ISSEI's plan works. The Korean commented, watching as ISSEI got into position with Bora to protect her. To be honest, I'm tired of trying to save what little is left of this place. Maybe the best thing to do is to start from scratch with my best specimens. Yes, that wouldn't be bad. William started talking to himself like a real man, his tone of voice showing that he was out of his mind. That's right, I will destroy everything and only those who were chosen by God will remain alive. A large dark golden magic circle with black borders appeared in front of William, something that left the vast majority in shock, as they could feel the great magical pressure it exerted. And the worst thing is that it did not stop growing. Is that idiot really thinking of destroying everything? ISSEI wondered with wide eyes. But before everything got too upset, a strong flaming aura sent all the debris flying. Even everyone was forced to cover their eyes by the strong light that was coming out. William was the only one who could watch as Raynare slowly rose to her feet. What stood out most about her figure was that much of her body was surrounded by chains. It burns, that was the first thought that crossed Raynare's mind as she finished standing up with clear difficulty. All this power hurts me. Raynare took a staggering step, causing the ground to crack under her feet. But, oh? What are you going to do if you can barely stand? William scoffed, the magic circle slowly growing larger and more dangerous. Destruction was inevitable, or so it seemed, for, when Raynare took another step, it all happened in less than the blink of an eye. The magic circle was destroyed, and William had a large hole in his chest that gave off an enormous amount of fire. I feel stronger than ever. Raynare's wild grin was the counterpart to everyone's reactions, except for ISSEI, who was clenching his fist in victory. William didn't even have time to process what happened. Raynare personally took care of it. You just needed to see how his figure moved from one place to another like a single golden flash, striking and tearing apart every limb of William without him being able to do anything about it. All he could do was regenerate, only to be burst once more. A large amount of broken sacred gears flew everywhere, something that no one missed. The fire, the blows, the energy, and the aura. Everything made it seem as if they were watching a person being skinned live and direct. Only instead of skin, they were sacred gears. In the end, William was finally able to react when he gave her a strong blow with his newly regenerated arm, although instead of sending her flying, he only left her suspended in the air a couple of meters away. William moved in at full speed to strike her again, but this time Raynare was able to stop him with only her hand, something that no doubt left him in disbelief. Raynare's smile turned into gritted teeth as she materialized several chains, causing William to vomit a large amount of blood as they all pierced his abdomen. Raynare didn't stop there and resumed his quick, sneak attacks, causing the barrage of sacred gears to present themselves once again. Although unlike before, William managed to find some resistance to her attacks and managed to connect more blows to her. The blows didn't even seem to affect her anyway. But that proved not to be the case when they both moved a couple of meters away from each other as a result of their last attacks that had collided. It could be easily noticed that the most affected by such an impact had been William, since he was forced to regenerate his broken arm. The strange thing was that his smile generated a great contrast with the apparent great disadvantage he was suffering. I must admit that for a moment I was frightened. But that's the vast difference between my divine body and your corrupted body. William's smile widened in a sickly way as he raised his arms. I don't wear out and I don't suffer any harm. Even if you tried to hide it, The chains around your body are fading and your power is dropping at a great rate, as well as your reflexes. Raynare could only grit her teeth, for the heretic was right. Still, she didn't give him the pleasure of teasing her any further and quickly pounced on him. This time saw the two of them share a great deal of blows, leaving all sorts of openings in their defenses, something neither of them wasted. Each time Raynare tore off a limb, William responded with a strong punch that left her trembling for a second. It went like this for a great number of sequences, until the last blow broke a large amount of her chains and left her somewhat dazed. Unfortunately, the moment did not allow her to falter, and just as they were about to share another blow, the great weight of wear and pain fell on her body like a great devastating sledgehammer, completely denying her the movement of her muscles. This ends here. William's monstrous voice left her even more paralyzed, so she only closed her eyes to receive the blow that would probably destroy her. Dragon shot. Raynare's eyes widened as she saw how William was thrown backwards without being able to contain the magical attack, to the point that he hit the wall and generated a huge explosion that completely destroyed it. ISSEI. Raynare mentioned his name with joy, but soon that joy turned into fear as she saw how the drops of blood began to fall. Okay, this was not in the plans. The brown-haired man commented with a very forced smile, as a nail of the monster was stuck in his abdomen. ISSEI's consciousness faded for moments, but Raynare was fast enough to catch him before he fell. "Why did you do that?" Raynare exclaimed, her demanding tone overshadowed by the tears forming in her eyes. "Don't you understand? My dragon shot would never be able to hurt him that badly. He's weakened." ISSEI completely ignored the question, feeling a little blood dripping from his lips. "So, was your idea always this? To finish him off with your dragon shot?" the fallen asked, doing her best to hold back her small sobs. "Don't be incredulous. That's far from eliminating him. That's why you'll do it." That made Raynare even more puzzled. "And how am I going to do that? I can't use my balance breaker anymore. I can barely keep it active." Her negativity vanished in just a second when ISSEI tapped her forehead with one of his fingers. "You weren't looking for a way to redeem yourself for all those people who died?" Raynare's eyes widened a little after hearing his words. "As I told you before, nothing you do will bring them back to life. But you can make a life continue. Now you have hundreds of them waiting for you. But, listen. I told you before to trust me." Raynare's eyes widened slightly as she felt ISSEI's trembling hand rest on her head. "Now I'm telling you that I trust you." After those words, a strong glow brimming with energy began to surround her. Transfer. Raynare stood up instantly after feeling a surge of unique power embrace her entire body, to the point that the single chain above her waist glowed brightly. ISSEI's hand slowly fell as his gauntlet slowly shattered into small pieces, until it finally became mere particles. Raynare clung to him tighter, but that feeling of desolation was left in the past when she felt hands resting on her back, so she didn't hesitate to look back. "Don't worry, we'll take care of him," Young Len commented. His typical apathetic expression had been changed by a small smile, to which Raynare replied in the same way. "Hey, I'm not that bad. It's just a little hole." ISSEI tried to lighten the mood but failed miserably by coughing up some blood. Raynare decided not to say anything about it, just shook her head at his lack of seriousness. Once the fall left him on the ground, she took a couple of steps and her gaze was fixed on where the dust lay. Her expression grew extremely serious and her fists clenched tightly as she watched a dark glow become more and more present from that direction. "Weren't you looking for a way to redeem yourself for all those people who died?" A large number of chains began to materialize and swirl around her like snakes. "The first step is to forgive yourself." A faint smile emerged on Raynare's face as she finally closed her eyes. "I know, and this time it won't be just words. This will be the first of many steps, don't you think so?" The image of ISSEI flashed through her mind, and a shiver ran through her body as she felt her mother and Rick place a hand on her shoulders. "I don't want to interrupt your thoughts, dear. But if you don't do something now, this place will be our grave." Fafner's words made Raynare open her eyes, watching as the dust dissipated with great violence, thus revealing William's figure and a rather powerful magic circle in front of him. Still, Raynare couldn't help but smile as she saw that one of the monster's arms was not fully regenerated. "Hey, Fafner, I have a question." Raynare's smile widened a little at what she was about to ask. "If you're a dragon, does that mean I can transform into one too?" "Oh, I like the way you think, dear," the Dragon King exclaimed with a rather peculiar tone in his voice. "Die at once." William's desperate shout was followed by a huge amount of magic coming out of the large magic circle. At first it looked like a normal magical attack, but soon it was seen as various elements began to fight each other for dominance, until finally the lightning won. Raynare's power soared with grow as she created 100 chains that tangled exaggeratedly fast about her body. Everyone was speechless as a huge golden dragon made of chains was created in front of them in just a second. They didn't have time to process it either, as the dragon's metallic snout opened, revealing an endless stream of golden flames that were desperate to be released. "See you never, you damned freak!" Raynare's voice was the last thing heard before the flames were released through a magic circle that appeared in front of the metallic dragon, which greatly enhanced the attack. The collision between the two attacks generated a powerful shockwave that forced them to retreat. But as soon as the fight began, Raynare's attack practically swallowed Williams without him even being able to react. Williams' agonized scream slowly died away as his whole body turned to mere ashes, until his trail was lost in nothingness itself, as the attack had been strong enough to destroy the top of the huge ship. Even some of the peasants were terrified to see how a part of the dark sky was tinged with such a strange golden fire. After what was that big commotion, Raynare abandoned her balance breaker and fell on the ground. Her breathing looked a bit agitated as she observed the big mess her attack had left. Anyway, he didn't have much time to admire it, as she found herself needing to know ISSEI's condition. "How does it look?" Raynare knelt down carefully beside him, noticing that he was unconscious. "He is not well at all. We need to get back to Grigori as soon as possible," Alan clarified with absolute seriousness, something that only saddened her even more. The awkward silence didn't reign for more than a second, as someone made her way between young Len and Alan, until she was kneeling next to Raynare, who watched her in astonishment. "What are you doing?" Raynare looked at her with some caution as she watched Bora move one of her hands to the brown man's bloody abdomen. "I just want to help," Bora replied in a soft tone, to which Raynare just looked at her. She didn't have to debate too much to finally nod at her in response, to which Bora smiled. Her right hand rested on her abdomen carefully, and her facial features tightened considerably. Just then, everyone could do nothing but stand in awe as several rings of light appeared on her fingers, emitting a powerful green glow. Raynare's eyes flickered with utter disbelief as she noticed how all of ISSEI's visible wounds were closing at a great speed. In the end, they all sat around ISSEI and watched the procedure for a couple of minutes. "Why is it taking so long?" Alan asked with some impatience. "It's his affected organs," Bora answered without losing concentration. "Can she heal the organs as well?" thought a rather surprised Raynare. Bora opened her eyes again and stepped back a little, making everyone watch ISSEI very intensely. The darkness was slowly disappearing with the opening of his eyes. At first his vision was a little blurry, but soon he could see better, and the first thing that presented itself was the smiles of young Len, Bora and Alan, who were kneeling beside him. ISSEI immediately understood what that smile covered in reassurance meant, so he did not hesitate to respond in kind. A fist appeared in front of his face, something that surprised him at first, but soon the smile returned to his face. ISSEI extended his arm slowly, and his fist collided with Raynare's. Perhaps they hadn't realized it yet, but this was the first glorious moment between them that would be captured in their memories forever. Thanks for watching this video. You really enjoy this video. Like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow Jyanzein for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.